Welcome back to the channel, guys, and to a new video. First of all, we've just passed 10,000 subscribers just yesterday, which really feels amazing. So thank you to everybody who has been part of this journey and helped me to get there. Reading all your comments and what you have to say really motivates me to keep this YouTube thing going, because I feel like I'm doing my little part of actually breathing some life into windsurfing with these videos and going over all the different things I have to say in these videos. So yeah, thank you very much. In today's video, I actually want to recap my wave season I've had this winter in Tarifa. This year, the weather in Tarifa was actually a lot different from all the other years. I was there for like 6 or 7 weeks from January to March, and throughout the whole time the waves were just pumping. I think the whole time I was there was not one day with less than 1 meter of waves on the forecast. And yeah, that is really unusual, because usually I get like 2 or 3 wave sessions if I'm staying for 2 months there. So this year, rather than focusing on the slalom, I've actually been wave sailing a lot more and taking advantage of all the waves around to try to learn as much as possible and get into this super amazing discipline of windsurfing. One of the first things I actually had to wrap my head around learning to wave sail this winter was how the wind direction is affecting wave sailing. Basically, before this winter, I didn't really have any idea what it meant if you have like an offshore or onshore forecast for the wave session that you have. But after having sailed so much in the waves, I have a much better understanding of how the wave direction is impacting the wave sailing. So let's talk about one of the sessions I remember quite well from this winter, and actually not because it went super well, but rather because I learned a lot during this session and it didn't go so well. So this day, to set the stage, was basically the day after the biggest swell we had throughout the whole winter. The day before, the swells were pumping with 4.7 meters, and it was actually not possible to sail that day because the waves were so messy, the shore break was so gnarly, and I think the wind was like so on and off between 5 knots and 40 knots, so I didn't go sailing then. But this day the waves were still pretty big, with like 2.5 meters, I think it was. And for someone pretty new to wave sailing like myself, these kind of onshore waves are actually quite intimidating. I was on my 5.5 sail with a 105 liter waveboard that day. So in terms of wave surfing gear, actually pretty big gear. And that was because the wind was very light. It was like 15 knots, but then it was also onshore. So I felt like I needed a lot of power to get out through the shore break and waves. And so I think a bigger board and a bigger sail helped me to get through that. And that brings me to my first lesson, is like timing the shore break. The previous years I've gotten pretty much wasted by the shore break a lot of times. So this year I tried to be a lot more calculating with it when to go out. And I figured that the best thing to do is actually to wait until you see that one of the set waves is rolling in, and then actually start to already go out when the set waves are rolling in, and not wait for them to pass, because this way you're kind of heading out and getting into the impact zone, which is basically the zone where the waves break the heaviest once the set is passed. I feel like if you wait for the set to pass, you're already a little bit too late and can end up in the next set by the time you hit the impact zone, because this day it was like 100 meters outside where the waves were really breaking and where the impact zone was. So I feel like I've gotten better at this winter, but during this session it was actually super difficult because the wind was so light, and on top of that the waves were breaking all the way outside to like 200, 300 meters outside. So you took like 2 or 3 minutes just to get out through the shore break. So timing the set waves was really not an option. There was a lot of luck involved, but somehow this day, you can see it was quite sketchy a lot of times, but I made it over the waves. And I also have some tips what I learned during this winter, trying to get over the shore break or the waves. And that is that you want to put your center of gravity very low when you're going over a wave or white water, and then you want to point your board like 90 degrees to the waves, put your center of gravity very low, and this way most of the times, even if I didn't have a lot of wind in my sail, I could hold on. But on this day I have to say it was also a lot of luck here that I just made it out without one of the big waves breaking onto me.
Oh, er ist gerade noch rüber. Alter, jetzt kommt aber eine Walze, Digga. Der hat das geschafft. Wow, Respekt. Ah, eine kommt noch. Ey, Digga, das war aber auch pure luck, Digga.
So once I was outside, I knew that there was a really nice break upwind. But I didn't really commit to sailing upwind there, because honestly I was a bit intimidated by the size of the waves that day. So as I was heading in, I kind of half-heartedly went for a little check turn on like a small lump, not really a wave. And the problem with that is that it was super onshore. So as you go down on the wave, you lose all the power from your sail because you're going straight downwind. So what you really have to do is to make sure that as soon as you don't have the power from the sail anymore, is that the wave can give you the power to get going. And as I was choosing just really any wave and not waiting for a good wave because I was kind of scared of the bigger ones, I ended up immediately falling out the back of the little wave I had. And then of course I was not planing anymore and I felt zero pressure in my sail. So I could see behind me that there were some bigger waves and I immediately wanted to get out of there. But there was not enough wind for me to make a tack, so I just went in the water, turned the sail around and tried to water start again, but there was also not enough wind for water starting. So by this time I already knew that I made a mistake by choosing this kind of non-wave and going like not jibing out before the impact zone, but choosing then a bad wave to go inside with. And I saw the waves rolling at me and I got properly washed. So then I had to swim I actually checked with the watch, 7 minutes, and I actually couldn't get back to my gear because every piece of wave, every bit of white water was washing in my gear further and further. So I was swimming behind my gear all the way back to the inside, getting washed frequently. And actually I also had the Insta360, the action cam on my head. So I had to be really careful also to not lose my action camera because of course I didn't want to lose like a 500 euro action camera. So yeah, that was not so much fun to get washed by all the waves, but in the end, I think I was more scared of the conditions than what really happened, because in the end I got washed a few seconds each wave, but nothing really serious happened there. I think it's just important that you not get stuck like in front of your gear when the wave is rolling over your gear, because then you can get hit by the board or fins or whatever. And yeah, thankfully my gear actually all made it in one piece. Quite surprising, honestly, because every wave was rolling the gear around. So yeah, quite surprising that nothing really happened to the gears. So the wave gear for sure can take a beating. And yeah, so the takeaway from the session is I wasn't intentional about my wave selection or my positioning. If you're not comfortable, you're more likely to hesitate. That's what gets you into trouble in the end. But now let's get into another session I can remember quite well. And this one actually because it was a lot of fun. After some chaotic onshore sessions, where I managed to only catch a few waves each time, I finally got a day with really nice conditions. The wind had swung around to a side offshore Levante wind and was stronger at around 20 to 25 knots, with a smaller swell of around 1.2 meters. And the side offshore direction of the wind that day really changed everything for me. The waves were a lot cleaner, so it was easy to get on the faces of the waves, and that day I actually went sailing for 70 kilometers and caught one wave after another. The wave size made a big difference too, because at just over 1 meter it was actually kind of the perfect size for learning wave sailing, because the waves were still powerful enough to ride, but not nearly as intimidating as on the bigger days. So as a result, I was not scared at all to really get onto the waves and try to make a lot of turns. I could focus on actually trying things rather than surviving the session. I felt like for the first time now I could finally get a feeling of what turning on waves with a windsurf board feels like. Now looking over the footage, of course, there's a lot of aspects to improve on. For example, I see that I made the top turn always way too early and didn't really fully go into the lip of the wave, and rather turning before that. But the main thing was that I was powered and I could catch so many waves and experiment with, switching hand positions, stances and all that stuff. So for example, the smaller conditions are not necessarily worse for learning to wave sail. And then to get kind of into the details of like the specifics, I was actually on a too big sail on the waves, and I could feel for the first time that when you're like on top of the wave and then you're trying to make the top turn back down into the wave, that I was way overpowered and I kind of had to open the sail way too much because I chose a too big sail for these kind of conditions. Also, the hand switching made a big difference. Because I was overpowered on the top turn, I was grabbing the boom more forward on the top turn, and then on the bottom turn, when needing the power to get back up on the wave, I was grabbing the boom with my backhand further back. Also, I feel like I've learned a lot about reading the waves that day, because I was most of the times like 200-300 meters away from the shore and then saw the lines coming in. And then I actually got a feeling after like 3 or 4 hours of sailing, like what kind of lines can end up becoming good waves near the shore. And I think this kind of wave selection is critical in like getting good waves in the end. Because in the beginning of the session, I was again just like turning on every lump that I saw and just getting the smaller waves. And by the end of the session, I was getting also the nicer waves with the nicer faces. So yeah, there were plenty of little learnings like this, but really the main thing that I took away from this, and this is kind of funny because I didn't think it would be the case like it is in speed surfing, the other discipline that I do, is that the conditions make such a big difference between like the onshore messy conditions or like nice, clean side offshore conditions. You really want to look and wait for the right kind of conditions to go wave sailing, and now I understand why the wave sailors are traveling all over the world to look for those kind of conditions. I mean, after the session, I immediately was thinking of where I could go to continue this wave journey, because this was actually my last session in Tarifa, and I was heading back home after this. And of course in Germany I don't really get any good wave conditions, especially where I'm living near the lakes. Maybe there's like a chance at Denmark or something, but I'm getting off topic. So yeah, that's kind of my little recap of this winter's wave season and some of the biggest lessons I've learned along the way. I still have a long way to go in wave sailing, obviously, but it's a journey I really want to go on and search for some other waves around the world. Because this wave sailing thing, yeah, I think this is quite fun. Thanks so much for watching, and especially to everyone who's joined me on this journey. I still can't believe we've hit 10,000 subscribers now. It's still wild to me. And if you've enjoyed the video, obviously like, subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.